and I'm the life science co-lead here at Business Sweden in the US, along with my colleague Jessica, who you'll be hearing from shortly. A quick note about this webinar, it is being recorded, and we'll be sending out the recording after this webinar today, and also the materials that we will be walking through with you and during this hour. So let's go ahead and jump into our agenda for today and a little bit of housekeeping before we all get started. So for today, we'll provide an update on the US life science market for approximately the next 30 minutes or so. We'll then be doing an interactive Menti activity where we're really eager to get your input on some of the upcoming US activities that we're thinking about and planning at Business Sweden, and also just to understand a little bit more about your needs in the US market and how we can essentially, take your input and co-create and shape activities that will really help you succeed and grow here locally. But on that note, I wanted to thank you all for filling out the survey form that was part of the sign up to this webinar. And you all indicated that there were really three key topics that were most relevant for you all. The first being market intelligence, the second being regulatory compliance, and the third one being market entry and commercialization. Just given this input, we'll do our best to address these topics during today's webinar, and we would warmly welcome further conversations with you about our topics today or about your situations in general. But for questions, if you have questions during the webinar, we have a chat function here. Please feel free to write in the chat as we're going through it. We'll also have a Q&A session here at the end. We'll be addressing those questions during the last 10 minutes of the webinar. We're also happy to have you unmute or raise your hand, unmute, and ask questions then, so we can make it more fun and interactive and less of me and our team talking to the screen here. But good. Before we dive into the market update, I also wanted to introduce you to our Business Sweden life science team, all of which you'll be hearing from today. So as I mentioned earlier, my co-lead is also going to be part of this webinar and a great contact for you all. So we have Jessica Conley, who is located in Chicago. We also have Joanna Dyermark, who's also located in Chicago, and my colleague Emma Hedlund, who's located in San Francisco on the West Coast with myself. So yes, very early here on the West Coast, but very happy to be with you today and hopefully catch many of you before your workday is up in Sweden. But great. Looking at the sign up list, I saw a lot of you we're familiar with, you may be familiar with Business Sweden, but just wanted to provide a little bit more information about Business Sweden in case you weren't aware. So our sole purpose here is to really support Swedish companies grow and expand abroad. Specifically, we focus on the US, but good to know we do have colleagues and offices all over the world that are very much here to support you with your needs in the local market. And I thought I could just share some of the recent projects that we've been doing at Business Sweden within life science in the last couple of years here to give you a better understanding of how we can support you with your journeys in the US. So, we've been looking at, various market landscapes, looking at product market fit for various solutions within life science. We support with go-to-market strategies. Lately, we've been doing a lot of investor mapping and pitch deck support, so that's also available for you. We also do incorporations in the US. I would say we do probably about 15 to 20 each year, so happy to support there. We also have a whole team of accountants that support with, back office support, payroll, annual tax returns and filings. We also have an HR partner on the team too, who can support with recruitment and hiring and all that HR infrastructure. So we are obviously partly government owned. We offer subsidies to Swedish SMEs, and we actually do offer some services free of charge too. So just know that we're here to support you. If we don't have a service you're looking for, we definitely have a very strong network too, and we can introduce you to the right partners that you would need to excel in the US market. And with that, I think we can go ahead and get started on our US life science market overview and update. Great. So if we move on here, I'd just like to start off with some context of the US market and just highlight some of the key differences compared to Sweden. So we're all on the same page here. So the US is the largest market among OECD countries. And as you can see here, in 2023, the US spent $14,400 per capita, and that's nearly double Sweden's $7,500 US per person. So you might be wondering, okay, this is great. The US is a large market, but I think it's important to maybe call out, why is spending so high here in the US compared to Sweden and other similar countries. So good to note that there's two reasons that are more systemic, and then two reasons that are maybe more cultural and population focused. So one of the systemic reasons is we have a very fragmented system. There's multiple payers and layers of administration. The second reason is we have very high admin costs, so that includes, billing, insurance, and compliance. But if we switch over to more of the cultural or population side of things, similar to other countries, we do have an aging population that naturally requires more care. And we also have quite a high burden of chronic disease in the US. So diabetes is very prevalent, heart disease, which of course drive up costs and long-term costs as well. So definitely the scale of the market's very, very interesting. Lots of opportunities here, especially when we're looking at costs. So definitely, any kind of solution innovation that Swedish SMEs can offer that's going to further bring down the cost and be cost efficient innovation is going to be very much appreciated here in the market. But you might be wondering, okay, we're spending all this money. What is the U.S. actually spending it on? So the highest, I guess, category that the U.S. spends is going to be within hospital care. We spend about $1 trillion, about 30% of our U.S. healthcare spending specifically on hospital care. And the next category is going to be on physician and clinical services. So that's about 900 billion US dollars, followed by retail prescription drugs at about $400 billion. And so some of the updates we're going to see are really trying to adjust some of these high costs. So looking forward to getting into that a little bit further here. I think it's also important to look at imports for the US. So if we move on here, just good to note, yeah, perfect. Good to note here that the US is the largest importer of pharmaceutical products in the world. So it's definitely dominated by countries like Ireland, Switzerland, Belgium, and Austria when it comes to total import value. But when we break it down per capita, I think it becomes a little bit more interesting here because Sweden really stands out. It actually ranks 10th at about $89 per capita. So it really shows that there is a strong foothold of Sweden here locally, even compared to some of the pharma giants we see in other markets. So we obviously have good long-term relationships between Sweden and the US when it comes to life science. Many global leaders are also here. So AstraZeneca is here, Sobi is here, Mölnlycke, Elekta, Getinge. And I think what's really great about these companies is they're not only exporting here, but they're also investing heavily in the US. So further reinforcing, Sweden as a credible, a trusted partner in the American market. And you may have seen this summer, there was some exciting announcements made from some of these larger companies. So firstly, AstraZeneca made headlines, I believe back in July, when they're going to be investing about $50 billion in the US through 2030. Various facilities, of course, in Virginia, Maryland, California, and a few other states here. And a few weeks before that, in June, Mölnlycke also is talking about investing in the US, 135 million US dollars for their wound care manufacturing in Maine. So it just goes to show that there is a lot of commitment to US manufacturing and localization of supply chains. And I think why this is so interesting is, of course, yes, Sweden is here, it's proving credibility, but we're also seeing quite a big push from the administration, the current Trump administration, to be here, be local. And so I think there is some signs that they're listening to what the administration here is and looking at how they can further expand into the U.S. market in a good way. So with that, I think we can go ahead and maybe pivot over to what we're seeing with the new administration now that we're aligned on kind of what we're seeing in the U.S. as far as the market goes. So I think with this new administration, we're really seeing some of the most significant regulatory shifts for years in the U.S. healthcare and life science sector. So as we see it as Business Sweden, there's really five key areas here that are really reshaping the business environment for global companies, including Swedish SMEs. So for each of these categories here, we're going to go into greater detail, but just at a high level, we're seeing the Department of Health and Human Services, they're undergoing an overwhelming restructuring. So they're getting different departments. They're actually cutting a lot of staff. So we'll talk about more about that and how that's impacting business here in the U.S. We also have a new public health agenda called MAHA, you may have heard of. So this is Make America Healthy Again. It's really emphasizing, the diet, eliminating toxins, physical activity, stress, medication overuse, and really trying to get at the root causes of disease. So we really anticipate there'll be bigger regulatory hurdles and some funding focus on nutrition, preventative, but also wellness-driven innovation here. Drug pricing reform is also something that's being talked about, and as you can see, that was the third key category that the U.S. spends on it at 400 million U.S. dollars. So really looking at how to reduce this further to be more in line with our OECD peers. We're also seeing Medicaid cuts and Affordable Care Act rollbacks. A lot of this has been done through that big, beautiful bill that was passed in July of 2025 by the Trump administration. So we are seeing some Medicare cuts that include stricter eligibility, working requirements to be able to tap into Medicare, and of course, funding changes as well. And lastly here, we are seeing some shifts when it comes to tariffs and supply chains. Similar to kind of the trajectory we're seeing with some of the large US companies, there's definitely a push for global players to reshore their medical supply chains to US soil. So we're going to go into all of these in greater detail here soon. But let's go ahead and start off with the restructuring we're seeing in HHS. So yeah, in March 2025, HHS announced that they were going to be restructuring. And so what's happening is they've actually consolidated or consolidating 28 different divisions into 15. So that's quite a big decrease here, which of course includes cutting several thousand positions. The goal here that they've stated is efficiency, but of course with government reforms, the reality of this is more complex. So it does mean that there's some opportunities here, but there does also appear to be some risk just given that we are seeing a lot of staff that's being cut. But to maybe take a step back, so the HHS oversees the National Institutes of Health, so NIH. They also oversee the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, which was quite talked about in the news last week and over the weekend, if you've been reading up on that. And they also oversee the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. And so the FDA is probably the single most important US agency for companies entering the life science and medtech space in the US. So similar to Sweden's Läkemedelsverket, for example, so regulating drugs, medical devices, diagnostics, and also food products and cosmetics too. So the FDA dictates, how the processes manufacturers must follow. They also oversee inspections and enforce safety standards here. So we really see that FDA is really that golden ticket for companies who are looking to enter the U.S. market, which is why it's really so important to follow what's happening at the FDA and understand the changes and how they can impact you. So we will look at when we look at some of the changes here that we're seeing, the first one that comes up is policy and regulatory changes. So the Trump administration really wants to streamline FDA approval, which is good news. So they want to make it faster and more efficient. We're especially seeing that they want it to be faster for a few key areas. So oncology being one, rare disease being another, and any kind of breakthrough therapy is another one that they've stated is very important and they want to streamline a bit quicker. So very positive for Swedish firms that are in this space that have innovative products, because we're expecting that there will be some momentum to get these through quicker. But what we are seeing is that they want to reduce what they've called entanglement between the FDA and the industry. So this could reduce opportunities for early guidance, advisory meetings. So this is often a key steps that SMEs rely on. So I think it's even more important to make sure that maybe you have this expertise in-house, or you're working with partners that know the FDA, just because the Trump administration feels that the FDA has been a little bit too cozy with the industry. So we are seeing them try to separate that a little bit more. Other announced changes that we're seeing is, of course, with leadership. So right now, Dr. Marty Makary is the FDA commissioner. He is a surgeon and health policy expert. He's known for patient safety advocacy and cost transparency initiatives. But we have seen that there's multiple senior leaders retiring, and which shows that there's probably future unpredictability at the FDA. So a little bit pressure is happening there. That kind of moves us into the next change here. So workforce reductions. The FDA has actually cut approximately 20% of its workforce. And many of those positions are scientists, policy staff, project managers. So some people actually review the submission. So with the promise of faster approvals, the fewer staff may mean some bottlenecks in the process too. So it might be better just to make sure that you have the appropriate budget and maybe extend that timeline just because we do expect some unpredictability with the FDA. And furthermore, in addition to some of the workforce reduction cuts, we're also seeing that their budget is being cut starting next year. So it'll be cut by about 5.5%, but that's actually roughly 6.8 billion US dollars. So we anticipate that's not going to just affect, drug and device reviews, but this will also impact grants, any kind of technical assistance, and public health coordination as well. So just some things to be aware of. So for Swedish SMEs, so what does this mean? So there is a chance for faster approval times, which is really good, especially in areas like oncology, rare disease, and also digital health tools, which is good to know. But again, compliance is going to be more complicated. So we're seeing that regulatory processes are shifting, and again, having those in-house experts or partners and be able to adapt quickly is going to be very important. So probably important to expect any kind of delays in the non-core FDA functions. So with guidance documents or clinical trial support or public health funding. So again, if your strategy depends on grants or technical advice, definitely build in extra time and budget for that. But with that, we can probably move on to MAHA, that Make America Healthy Again initiative that was announced in early 2025. So what we're seeing is this is definitely a pivot away from the healthcare system that has been more traditionally dominated by pharmaceuticals, and we're moving more towards prevention, patient empowerment, and lifestyle-based intervention. So it's definitely more of a political statement as it is a policy agenda. We're seeing that there's a lot of skepticism when it comes to big pharma, and they want to have a stronger focus on public health. So MAHA at its core, what is it all about? It's really concerned with chronic disease, particularly obesity, diabetes, and of course the U.S. healthcare industry spends hundreds of billions of dollars each year on these, so it is an important topic to address. And the White House has set up actually a MAHA commission earlier in 2025, and they're making recommendations on food systems, preventative care, and wellness, and especially targeting and putting an emphasis on children's health, which is really good to note. And just being from the U.S., chronic disease it's definitely a medical issue, but it's also a cultural one. I'm sure many of you have traveled to the U.S. You've seen kind of the portion sizes that are served at restaurants. So that's one example here. You also think about school lunch and children. Oftentimes school lunches, they don't have all the components of a healthy meal. When I was growing up, they actually classified a pizza as a vegetable. So a lot of work to be done here. So it is definitely a very important topic that is being looked at right now. But for the MAHA movement, they did release a report back in May of 2025 that actually urged a lot of reforms that go beyond healthcare. So again, they're looking at dietary guidelines, food additives have been very, very good. They're overhauling some labeling and also reconsidering some subsidies. But they're also looking at, more of the research into nutrition, in toxicology, mental health, and the long-term safety of medications and vaccines. So we're definitely seeing some reorientation of research funding and policy and priorities. Of course, the vaccine, some of the vaccine movement was seen over last week. So definitely a hot topic in Congress right now that's being very much debated. So good to keep an eye on this and kind of see that Congress is kind of concerned with some of the outcomes of MAHA. So while the intentions are good, how it's being acted out, there is some concerns within Congress about how this is playing out. But for Swedish companies specifically, so MAHA is definitely shifting market priorities away from being more reactive, pharma-based treatments, and more towards digital health, which Sweden is very strong in, preventative solutions and patient engagement. So definitely for Swedish companies that are active in digital health, in remote monitoring, any kind of nutrition, diagnostics, mental health, this could be a really key moment to position your solutions and how they align with MAHA and the prevention movement that we're seeing here in the U.S. And another topic that's been discussed quite a bit is this Big Beautiful Bill, or the BBB, as we'll refer to it during this webinar. So there's been some changes there as well. So one of the things I wanted to call out was for telehealth services, that they've really locked in healthcare plan coverages before the deductible. So this was actually made during COVID, but now it's permanent. So this is essentially a huge boost for telehealth adoption, because it's going to be lowering out-of-pocket costs for patients, and really strengthens market opportunities. So anything within telehealth or digital solutions is going to be very important for the next coming months here. We've also seen some changes to the US's health savings account. So this is money that is set aside from individuals, from employees, from their employer, to be able to spend, on various health services and solutions too. So definitely something to think about with your solutions and making them HSA eligible, because we're expecting that there's going to be a bigger pocket of money for individuals to actually spend on solutions that can be available through their HSA accounts too. But let's go ahead and shift over to some opportunities here. So moving on, I think one of the clearest signals we're seeing from the administration and from this MAHA movement is definitely just a strong push towards prevention, patient engagement, and precision health. So we're seeing quite a bit of momentum if we look at regulatory approval. So some of the FDA data that we've come across, there's been a remarkable rise in approvals, and there's this the trajectory is expected to continue. So specifically for AI devices, we saw about 60 that were approved in 2018. But now more than 220 were approved in 2023, and we expect this to continue. So this signals not only that there is growing innovation in the space, but there's also more acceptance of these tools here in the US. Another one is digital therapeutics, which also tripled in the same time frame. So there was about 63 in 2018 that were approved, and now we're at about 192 in 2023. So again, just strong support for these types of solutions that are more prevention oriented, patient centric. So kind of remote behavioral health interventions and chronic disease management are definitely the ones that stand out from our research. So an area where approvals are definitely surging, and we expect this to also continue, is going to be within neurology and ophthalmology. So for instance, one example would be AI systems that can detect early stage Alzheimer's. That's very important right now in the market, or diabetic retinopathy. These are all being fast tracked. So definitely, if you're in this space, something good to write that momentum on. And then at a recent conference I went to, several hospital representatives were discussing how they're not just adopting tools because they're innovative, but they're adopting them because their reimbursement models are shifting to more value-based care. So not only are we saying that tools that detect disease, early on, keep patients out of the ER, are on the rise, but it's also helping with the payers. So again, these whole cost concerns that we saw and talked about earlier on are definitely important. So saying that it's more patient centric, but it's also bringing down the cost. So especially if you can position your solutions in that way, it's something that definitely is good to keep in mind for the U.S. market. So looking at Swedish SMEs, we just see that these trends for U.S. regulators, they're just being more receptive of digital health technologies. Again, they're lowering barriers entry for solutions that are kind of moving away from the traditional sick care categories and just more towards prevention, which is really good. And anything within an AI or machine learning driven diagnostics, monitoring solutions, digital therapeutics, just really important to ride this momentum and really position yourself as credible players in this prevention and precision space, just because it is such an important topic to this administration too. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass over to my colleague Jessica, who will go into the other key categories here, and starting out with drug pricing reform. Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Abigail. So yes, as one of the other key categories that the Big Beautiful Bill, so one of these NOMERs, is focused on is drug pricing reform. Overall drug prices in the US have been a major concern for many years. And it's just another, I would say, administration that really wants to tackle this. So this is not the first time, but it's definitely a big focus area for the current administration. And as you can see here on a drug price index on the right, especially brand name drugs are about 4 times the price in the US, so 4 times of the of an average of 33 OECD countries. So that is the the key issue that the administration is pointing at and that they want to fix. And so again, this has been also a focus beforehand. And also Democrats have had some activities around it and tried to increase Medicare negotiation power. So some of the government programs had more negotiation power with pharma companies. And some of that has actually, though, been reduced by the current act, by this big, beautiful bill, as it's called. So it's now, in some parts, actually shielding certain orphan drugs from price negotiations. So it's a bit contradictory there in what the bill is intended to do. But the argument, at least from the administration, is that there's many other categories that they're trying to reduce the prices for. And another way of reducing these prices that they're trying to use is these most favored nation pricing targets, as they're called. So you'll see this MFN shorthand. Again, that's most favored nation, and a pricing target where it's basically the administration wanting to get to about a 30 to 40% discount of certain drugs. And they are asking the largest pharma companies to do that. So this has been in the works, this pricing target, since about May 2025, where the first executive order of the Trump administration was placed. And then most recently, so it's been going on over months, there's been different executive orders to this extent. And technically, the Trump administration or the White House itself does not have the power to set these pricing targets. So they are asking HHS and CMS, so some of these institutions that are more the executive, to implement these targets towards pharma companies. And maybe you've seen most recently in the end of August, and here in September, there have been also letters from the Trump administration towards the 17 largest pharma companies, asking them to adjust prices. So those are some of the activities that we're just seeing currently. The administration is saying that there should be 30 to 80% price cuts resulting from this. However, other experts are a bit skeptical that these types of major pricing targets can be met. We see, like now early signs that some pharma companies are reducing prices, but this large extent that's targeted by the administration, there's also some skepticism by other experts whether that is realistic. But yeah, that's what we're currently looking at here. And there's definitely, it's also talked about as a long-term strategy, because in the near term, it just can be a little bit challenging to get that through. Yes, but so that's some of the key points here around pricing. But then let's move on and look at the Medicaid and Affordable Care Act. Items that we're seeing, I guess, around the Big Beautiful Bill, or actually the Big Beautiful Bill is also most recently now trying to be rebranded by the administration into Working Families Tax Cut Bill. Maybe you've seen that. It's starting to trickle through from some of the Republican lawmakers. So just so you know, Working Families Tax Cut Bill, Big Beautiful Bill, it's the same thing, but it might not come up this wording. So when it comes to these government programs, like Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, ACA, which was also dubbed Obamacare, as you might be familiar with, those programs are starting to be partially phased out, or certain premiums are starting to be phased out. So we wanted to provide a key timeline here for you over the next few years, or as early as what is going to be implications this year and then through the next few years. So what we're going to see is that because Affordable Care Act premium subsidies are going to be reduced, about 7 to 8 million Americans are at risk of losing coverage. So that's the expectation before the end of 2025 already. So a very immediate effect here. And then we're also seeing stronger requirements around Medicaid. So there is basically a more strong requirements around how many hours of work or, for example, community service an individual has to perform in order to be eligible. So the eligibility requirements are stricter. And then there's also going to be certain, it seems like there's going to be implemented certain different bureaucratic layers and certain barriers for individuals. So more renewal requirements and so on that is going to likely reduce patients to use it or certain also patients. So it's especially expected to have an effect on Americans in rural areas or with less access to technology in general to just lose access to these programs. And then as they are going in full effect, these measurements by the bill, by 2028, we're seeing also an additional 7 to 11 million more individuals losing coverage. So this will definitely have some results on hospital systems because there's an expectation that more individuals that do not have health coverage are going to still need health care. So it's just more of a burden or, more of an impact that it's going to have on hospitals and then states also themselves. So that's a bit what we're going to see here in the coming years. And then if we want to go to the next steps, because we're wanting to see now what kind of impact this has now for Swedish companies, of course. So it does have an impact on how to position your product or your solution within life sciences for the US, because there's just going to be just an expectation there's going to be different priorities by those bodies that are purchasing your products or solutions. So for example, cost savings are going to be a key priority for many hospitals for some of the reasons I just said. It's just about these patients that they have which are not going to be having health coverage. So, as it's already been, of course, for years, the case, it's about turning over beds quickly and getting processes done smoothly, also with digital health solutions, as Abigail was also talking about. So it's about speeding things up and cutting costs. So when it comes to I think this is just more exaggerated because, again, these things are not new, but it's just more exaggerated due to the cuts that are being done to certain health coverage programs. And then in addition, we're also not seeing these rollbacks affecting the 50 states of the US equally. So it's really important to be aware that, for example, states like California or New York, where there is just a larger population in Medicaid programs, those states are going to be just affected more intensely and are just going to be scrutinizing new purchases more is the expectation. So there are good resources, and also we're always happy to share those where you can see how different states are affected, so you can strategize around which states make the most sense to target initially. And then lastly, as we've now been hearing, all these government programs, Medicaid, Affordable Care Act, they're affected. So it's important to know about non-governmental payer segments that could be a target audience for you. So examples are, for example, health savings accounts, so HSAs. They're very common here. You might be familiar, but they're essentially for employees to have a discounted way of accessing health services. So the discount is that it's a tax-free version because you get before tax payouts from your salary, and then you can use that. There's also employer-sponsored insurance, which is going to be making, of course, for employees, going to be more attractive if there's no other government programs. And then patient access support, those are programs by pharma companies, for example, where one can get rebates or certain payment plans to access drugs essentially more easily. So I think these payer segments is something that is going to be important to look at, just to see certain target audience, new target audiences, or additional ones for your products. Yes, and then if we want to move forward, when it also looking at the last item here of what the new administration is setting up, which are the pharma tariffs, or which have been in the works. So the industry had been fairly untouched over the years by tariffs. However, those have now tariffs it has been some uncertainty over the last months. And there is still some negotiations going on, and also some of these 232 investigations. So what that means right now, I think you're probably watching this closely, but as we know now, the European Union has a 15% tariff rate negotiated for brand name drugs. Generics are currently not touched by tariffs. And in addition, we see that other countries like Japan have, a lower rate, because they also have a deal now set up with the U.S. administration. So their tariffs range between 0 to 15%. And then we see some other countries like Singapore, India, Switzerland, and China, where the tariff discussions are still going on. And there are these Section 232 investigations. So these, you might be familiar, we're all too familiar these days with Section 232. It's essentially a power that the president has in any national security, kind of when it comes to national security considerations, that they can adjust tariffs more quickly. But the EU plays a huge role, so it was really important to have a deal. It is now something that gives some security, because even though it's a 15% increase, of course, it's at least a deal that has been struck. So I think that gives some more of a stable baseline. And this now also does incentivize, or it's supposed to also incentivize, like some more stable trade going forward. So yeah, there's lots that could be said, but I'll leave it at that, just to stay here a bit on time and talk a bit more also about what kind of incentives now the administration is trying to set around new investments for some of the large pharma players. So if we want to have a quick look at this, the administration has announced, or different companies have announced manufacturing investments, because that's also something, the reshoring goal that the administration has had, that Abigail mentioned earlier. So overall, we see these announcements from the AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson. So Abigail had mentioned the Swedish ones, but we also see, Eli Lilly, Bristol Myers Squibb, Roche, so also other companies making very large investment announcements. What we also see, it's interesting, some of these companies also mention the same announcement a couple months later and a couple months later. So there is definitely also an effort to kind of showcase and re-showcase the kind of investment companies are making, due to the type of pressures that they're receiving from the administration. What is still to be seen is just any real structural shifts in supply chains, by which we mean that there is just certain price pressure on these drugs, and a lot of the supply chain, there is no competing to produce certain things in the US market, especially when it comes to generics. So the production is just, for example, very, very strong in India and in other East Asian countries, and it's not clear, and there's no experts don't really see a solution that whole supply chain is supposed to, can come over to the US just from a labor cost, et cetera, perspective. But yeah, we do see all these investments. And then I think just if we want to move on and just look overall, what kind of incentives now the Big Beautiful Bill is also setting for these companies to do these investments. So it does show there are there's some relief from certain investment incentives that were supposed to expire. So now with this new bill, if one sets up a manufacturing facility, or also, for example, for R&D efforts in the US, one gets major tax breaks. There were tax breaks available before, but they were supposed to expire. And this bill now essentially extends those further. So there's immediate write-off possibilities from a tax perspective, and that's some of the reshoring incentives that are set. But to wrap all of this up, I know we've tried to put a lot of information in a short amount of time. Just to sum up what we've discussed and what we think are some of the key considerations and recommendations for all of you and for Swedish companies is to really stay abreast of the MAHA priorities. So we've talked about the digital health focus, the focus on prevention, and all of these items. And anything that's changing, there's continuous dialogue with these governmental bodies that are executing on MAHAs, like HHS, like CMS, like the FDA, very importantly. So very important just to keep an eye on those and staying informed on those policy changes from those players. And then we also just see, very important to have strong stakeholder engagement. So stakeholders like clinical leaders, the KOLs, patient advocates, so those types of stakeholders in the ecosystem, just as things develop and new priorities keep emerging as these things get implemented also on the state level. So just to stay on the forefront of what's important to these stakeholders that you are trying to work with. And then localization and partners for scalability. I think that's always something to consider once the U.S. market becomes really important, because it's also just very far away. So that hasn't changed, but yeah, it's just important to keep close with your partners and be able to localize here. And then the target geographies, we just wanted to reiterate that it's these effects from these new changes by the administration. They're not created equal across all the 50 states. It does affect states differently because different states have different amounts of people, for example, in Medicaid. So very good to be aware that you pick your states that you start rolling out or start working in very deliberately, because they might be affected in different ways. Yes, so with that, we'd like to get to the section of talking about what you are looking for and some of the programming we have been planning, and seeing what your reactions are, because we want to make sure those are relevant to you. So I'll hand it over to Emma.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. Yes, so moving on to some upcoming events that we are planning for. So in order to kind of continue strengthen the Swedish and US life science platform, we are planning for a couple of events now during the fall 2025, but also early next year. And this is also a way for us to really support Swedish companies in both identifying new partnership, find new collaboration, meet with potential investors here in the US. Some of the areas also that you mentioned were important for you when you sign up to this webinar. So one event that we are planning for is a US hospital visit that will be on the East Coast. So the aim of this hospital visit will be to discuss topics such as oncology, precision medicine, and use of AI. Another event that we are looking into and planning is an event in connection to JP Morgan Healthcare Conference that will be in January 2026. We have previously hosted a breakfast seminar or breakfast networking event in connection to this conference. So we are planning to do something similar this year again. And this is also in order to both create a forum where you can meet with local stakeholders here in the US, but also meet with other people that might be flying in for this conference. So in order for us to make this event as valuable and fruitful as possible for Swedish companies, we would really appreciate just a couple of minutes of your time now to gather your input on these events. So we have prepared just a short Menti for you with a couple of questions. So either you can go into menti.com and you can enter the code you see here to the left, or you can just scan the QR code here with your phone, and you should be directed to the question. So yeah, either write menti.com, add the code here, or just scan the QR code. So hopefully you will see this view now on your phone or on your computer. And again, if you haven't seen this yet, you can scan the QR code here to the left and you should be directed here. So we can give it just a couple of seconds for people to come in. Good, and I think we can get started. So as I mentioned, there is a JP Morgan healthcare conference in January 2026. This is an annual conference and is one of the world's largest healthcare events, and is also seen kind of as a benchmark as well for global healthcare and life science trends. And this year it will be in San Francisco, California. So just starting off a little bit, is your company planning to attend the JP Morgan conference in San Francisco? So please add here, yes, if you are planning to attend, maybe you are still considering it, if it's not relevant for you this year, or any other input. So a little bit mixed so far, most still considering it and are planning to attend. Okay, good. We can move on to the next question. So if you are planning to attend the JP Morgan conference, what would be your main reasons for attending? Would it be to meet investors, maybe partners, suppliers, policymakers, opinion leaders, maybe industry peers, customers, or to gather market updates? So please choose the main reasons for attending. So a lot of focus on meeting investors, it seems like. Also to meet with partners, suppliers, some with policymakers. Okay, perfect. So moving on a little bit to how we Business Sweden can support you in the best way. So what kind of support ahead of the JP Morgan conference would be of most interest to you and your company? So for example, be introductions maybe to investors and partners, maybe some type of pitch coaching to get market insight, regulatory updates, or more maybe branding or marketing, so Swedish visibility. I think introduction to investor is the most clear, the clear topic. Okay, perfect. Good. So moving on to the next question then. So previous question was ahead of the conference, but what kind of support during the conference would bring most value to you? So would that be to maybe schedule these investor pitch sessions, having some type of networking event, roundtable discussions, maybe having a couple of keynote speaker session, or any other inputs? Okay, so investor pitch sessions, some networking event. Okay, perfect. And the last question we have for the JP Morgan conference, so in terms of timing, so if we would have some type of event related to the conference, what timing would suit you the best in that case? So the conference itself is from Monday to Thursday. So for example, Sunday before the conference, maybe during the conference, but in the morning, or still during the conference, but in the evening, or if you're not planning to attend, you can write that, or any other timing. Okay, most seem to be a bit flexible. Okay, so could be both Sunday, but it can also be during the conference week. Good. So moving on to another event that we are planning for, Johanna.
Yes, thank you, Emma. So as for our second event, we are currently planning an East Coast visit, primarily for Swedish SMEs, so for you guys. We see that this should be an opportunity to connect with prominent hospitals, key opinion leaders, and policymakers in the US on site. And we have put together just an example agenda so that you can see on the next slide what such a program or such a visit could look like. These types of program often run for 2 to 3 days, and we are considering, for instance, building on the US-Sweden Cancer Research and Care Agreement, and might be possible to introduce Swedish SMEs to research institutes and similar in this area. We also believe in different types of networking events and meeting with policymakers and key opinion leaders. One area we are also exploring is how artificial intelligence and machine learning is used in practice in healthcare. So this could, for instance, include a smart hospital visit to see where the technology currently is in the US and what needs are present among US hospitals. And lastly, as you can see to the right, we are also considering arranging this visit so that it's easy to visit any trade show that might be relevant to you in the nearby area, so that the participating companies really get maximum value for their travel to the US. And if we look at the next slide, we are considering some dates for this. You can see them here. We are looking at mid-November in Boston or New York. This would also be in conjunction with an AI in drug discovery and AI in healthcare summit in Boston. So that would be possible to attend at the same time. We are looking into the first days of December. That will be Boston, New York, or Washington, D.C. However, contradictory to the name of this event, we are also considering arranging it in conjunction with the JP Morgan Healthcare. We realize that a travel to the US takes time, it takes investments, and it could be better for companies to try to get the maximum out of that single visit. So then it wouldn't be an East Coast visit, but it would be the same purpose for the participating companies. And also, we are looking into other dates as well. So if we move to the next question, Emma, we would now just like to check with you which of these dates and locations would suit you best. Would mid-November, beginning of December, or mid-January in conjunction with the JP Morgan conference be better? Or would another date in November, December, or another date in January, February be best for you? If none of these works, you can also press none of the suggestions. All right. Mid-November, early December, nice. And one suggesting JP in conjunction with JP Morgan. All right, we're happy to hear that this seems possible to you. Okay, we have 222, interesting. That will be difficult to process later, but we still appreciate your input. All right, but then we consider all these dates possible for these companies. Wonderful. Emma, we can move to the next slide. And to help us prioritize which partners and which hospitals and key opinion leaders we should involve in this visit, we would like to know which of these 4 main areas would be most relevant to you. Would it be most relevant to focus on oncology, building on the US-Sweden agreement, on AI and machine learning in life science and healthcare? Would it be precision medicine, or would it be medtech and digital health? For instance, devices monitoring digital health apps, etc. It seems like oncology and AI and machine learning in life science are 2 very relevant topics. Thank you so much. AI especially, that's great to hear. If you have other thoughts on topics that you believe would be highly relevant to you during such a visit, you can always write in the chat or reach out to us afterwards with your thoughts. But with that, I would like to thank you for your time. We can just have a very, very quick look at the last question here. And this is, if you have any thoughts on what would be most helpful to you in terms of Business Sweden support, we would be grateful to get your thoughts. How can we help you accelerate growth in the US? Is it more regulatory advice, or is it an introduction to certain stakeholders? You can feel free to write now or write in the nearest minutes. But I think that we need to investor introductions, for instance. Thank you. Feel free to add your thoughts here. That's much appreciated. But with that, I'm handing back to Abigail to wrap us up here.
Great. So great to see these answers trickling in. Please feel free to have a think about it. We'll keep this up and open for you. But yeah, thank you so much for your input today. We do have a few extra minutes here, so I did want to open up the floor for any questions that you may have. I'm not seeing any in the chat. There's still time to write. Otherwise, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question. We're also happy to set up calls afterwards to talk maybe more and more specifically about your situations as well. We're here to support. So I'll give it a quick minute here to see if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question.